But this was about the two Davids, Benavidez and Morrell and Luke, after a red-hot build to this fight. So much bad blood between them, so much good stuff going on. They put on a mini classic. Some people are talking about multiple Fight of the Year contenders coming off this card on Saturday. But after what we saw from Benavidez, scoring a unanimous decision over 12 rounds, what did that performance in your eyes say about what could happen next and his chances of winning the undisputed title against the winner of Better BF Bivol 2?
In some ways, the performance made me more confident in his chances. In other ways, it made me less confident.
Healthy hands, though, unlike the Vosdick debut at light heavyweight, you see what you get now from him.
Yes, you got just relentless punishment, body work. Let's talk about the good part first, because I want to tell you about one thing that really kind of stood out to me, but let's talk about the good first from David Benavidez. First of all, I think he landed 47.9% of his power shots according to CompuBox.
Ridiculous.
Which is
in a close fight, in a close back and forth fight between elite guys, that's ridiculous.
And we'll talk about Morrell in a minute, because I also think he showed fantastic heart. But let's talk about the good part of Benavidez. The body work was absolutely tremendous. He found so many openings for it. BC, how about the guard peels and then coming around the corner?
Dude, the variety. Every fight, Benavidez is adding more offensively to the creativity. You're seeing little sidearm shots to get around the guard. You mentioned pulling the glove down and whacking him, the uppercuts, the combinations. And he does that standing right in front of you, squared up. I mean, it's ridiculous.
He has so many ways of getting you to defend and then builds offense around that you just can't. You're just going to get rained on. It doesn't matter where you put the umbrella. It just finds ways to get inside, and that's really what he was so effective at. The jab wasn't his most potent weapon, but it was very, very important, again, to get the gloves up, and then he could work around the sides and do the peels and everything else. So the body work, the creativity, the overall work rate, it's just hard to keep up with Benavidez because he's just nonstop. He's always in your face. And I want to say this too, BC. I don't want to overstate the case of Benavidez's defense. In fact, there was a couple times he got hit with some big shots and got his legs wobbled just for a moment.
Round 4, that right hand off the ropes.
And then in 11, obviously he had to touch the gloves, which was partly a trip, but he got hit with some big shots. I mean, there's no denying it. I'm not making the claim that he's some kind of defensive slickster. Far from it. However, for a guy who is always throwing and squared up in front of you, his defense, given those contexts, is actually pretty good.
Dude, can I tell you something?
Please.
Heading into the fight, according to CompuBox, he had the 3rd best plus-minus in all of boxing.
It's remarkable.
We're talking about Shakur Stevenson level. That's normally boxing technicians. This is a monster. This is a stalking bully who fights mean at every turn, which means he's always looking to add that extra power shot in, and yet it's hard to hit this guy and overtake him.
And I think to the extent he got hit at all in this fight with some of those big shots, it's only because Morrell showed incredible gumption, which a lot of opponents I don't think necessarily would have, especially late in that fight. But, you know, his ability to step out at angles now, close range on his terms, he's just doing a bunch of stuff that, and also, BC, let's just be honest, part of his defense is his offense.
No question.
He's just throwing. So the guys just can't get going. But he complements that now with better defense along the way. And I have to say, through all of that, I'm like, dude, if he can just have a high work rate, he can beat anybody in that division. That's just the reality. And if you want to try and discipline him like Morrell did, it wasn't enough.
He's got a great chin, too.
He has a phenomenal chin. And by the way, his cardiovascular conditioning, I'm not going to call it Marab level, but...
Well, it used to be a potential problem. Remember, when he was stripped of the title for the failed drug test, then missing weight, the narrative was this guy doesn't have the discipline to be an elite fighter. He turned that around on the Caleb Plant win. He's only gotten better in those areas because I rewatched this fight, and it's like every time Morrell had success, Benavidez dug into a deeper gear and came back even more aggressive, more volume, constantly putting on him. He's a tsunami. I don't think we've seen someone his size, even if his power hasn't fully carried up to 75 on like a one-punch level, right? It's still more about
I want to talk about
accumulation and beating you down. He is all over you. It is hard for anybody to. I'm actually surprised ultimately, and it's a credit to Morrell that he went the distance because the version of Benavidez that he fought on Saturday was the prime best we've ever seen of him. So for Morrell to go the distance there and even have a couple moments late, it speaks as we said to how great he may be one day. Because remember how young and he's only had 12 pro fights now.
Let me add to that if I may. BC, don't you find it really interesting that both in MMA and boxing now you're seeing guys emerge who don't necessarily have, at this weight class, we're talking about Benavidez, not 68 and below, They don't have lights out power. They don't have lights out finishing ability, but they have this insane capacity for work.
Yes.
And people just can't deal with it.
You have to hurt them to change them.
In MMA and it works in boxing. Again, there's differences between them, obviously, but I find that very noteworthy.
He's the least likely guy a couple years ago that we would think could weaponize cardio the way he does. Obviously, he's weaponizing it through the vehicle of a mean, hard-hitting, creative offensive force. But you're right. To some degree, he's weaponizing this cardio because it's not just can your backbone hold up. Like Demetrius Andrade looked good for a couple rounds, and then
it just faded.
And all we always talk about is, Benavidez like the great slow starter. Takes time to adjust, but once he makes that adjustment, it's downhill. He was almost downhill in round one. And I asked him about it after the fight, and his response was, it was easier to hit Morrell than he thought it would be. And I think some of that is due to the decision Morrell made to actually kind of back up his words and trade a mano-a-mano. Morrell didn't make this a boring fight by trying to circle away and use his legs. He stood and fought. But the fact that Benavidez started high pace from round one, dude, when he's dialed in like this, I had questions coming in too. Could he beat Bivol or Beterbiev based on what we saw against Gvozdyk? Dude, when he's healthy, he can beat anybody.
Okay,
he can beat anybody.
Let me tell you what concerns I have. You called him hard hitting. I am not convinced of that. At 175, I have real questions about his power.
From a one-punch standpoint, yes, I'll give you that.
He overwhelms you clearly. I'm not suggesting. I mean, look, he just beat a really quality opponent in a really quality way. But now we're talking about Beterbiev and Bivol. Very different ball game. If you can't hurt those guys, that's a tough fight to win. Just matter of factly. And a guy like Beterbiev is interesting because he's going to meet him head on. And a guy like Bivol is also interesting because his ring craft is the best in the entire division.
Yes.
So the two next fights for him are very, very different, but also much more interesting than even this one was already. But I just have to say, one, the power problem, I think, is going to be a real limiting factor at the very, very top end of this division for him. Second, right now, he is, flying high with good reason. He looks so fucking good. But this style is going to age poorly. Now, that's not really relevant for the next fight or the one after that, or really even for the foreseeable future. But it will age out quickly. It will age out quickly. If your whole premise is, I'm going to outwork you, but not with dominating power, when you begin to decline in age, that's going to catch up
let me ask
rapidly.
You this. It wasn't a topic this week, but when we went out last year to those PBC events, we talked to Jim Lampley a couple times. We interviewed him. One of those interviews, I remember him telling me, maybe it was the time that we were at that tank in Benavidez co-feature, that he had talked to Benavidez, and he thinks down the line that Benavidez could move up to heavyweight and has the size to do it. To do that, to go up to cruiser and then heavy, it's going to have to be more about boxing. And he's probably going to be able to. His speed, I thought Morrell was going to have a distinct speed advantage over him, and Benavidez's hand speed was right there with him, right? I wonder if the higher he goes, if he's going to still be that bully or if it will be more of a mix of boxing.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I don't know what to say, but I just feel like there is so much enthusiasm about what he turned in on Saturday, and with very good reason, but we should not be blind to how the next set of matchups are both more difficult and directly challenge the way in which he wins fights by some of the most skilled power punchers and or technicians anywhere in boxing. Different ball game.
There were a few rounds. This will. It feels like this is a fight of the year contender. I don't know if it ends up being in the top 3 or 4.
Very good fight of the year. I don't know.
There were a couple sequences. Round 4 obviously was the big one where especially those first 4 rounds were so tense, so much those back and forth exchanges.
How was the atmosphere in T-Mobile?
On fire during the main event, particularly.
Was there a big? I know we talked about it
during the Pitbull Cruz fight. It was on fire.
Yeah, it was nuts.
It was all Mexico.
Dude, that Pitbull Cruz Fierro fight was like on.
We're
meth.
gonna get to that. Yeah,
it was fishing with Hitler pre-meth. It was great. It was unbelievable.
Can we stop referencing that, please? God.
Okay, the point I want to make was, you heard it a little bit on the broadcast? Did Morrell have a noticeable contingent of fans in attendance? There was a brief moment early in the fight where you heard Cuba.
Yes. And then the majority of the crowd started to boo in response.
Yeah.
Yes, which was kind of funny. Dude, like they didn't sell out, but they had over 12,000 in there, and those were Benavidez fans and they were Pitbull fans. Let's be honest, Pitbull brings a big crowd wherever he goes.
Yes, he does.
But yeah, they were pro Mexican fans, and look, Benavidez. Say it like this. I already had him number 10 pound for pound. This is the fight, though. I think everybody's going to put him in pound for pound. Look at the run he's on. Look at the difficulty of the opponents. Look at the style difference going from Power Puncher Lemieux to Caleb Plant as a boxer to the creative in size and southpaw of Andrade, who's tough to beat and was unbeaten coming in, to Vazdik with the Ukrainian background, the former champion at 175. Now to David Morrell, who we didn't know how great he was, right? He only had 11 pro fights. We can only know at a certain level of competition. But Morrell fought his ass off and rightfully lost. Dude, the run he's on.
He's pound for pound now.
He's pound for pound. He's an
his style,
attraction.
dude, the ability of David Benavidez is so remarkable that you mentioned, like, he's beating all these different body types, sizes, and now weight classes too. His style is a very unique one. It reminds me, again, for MMA fans, it's a little Habib-like, where it's like, oh, Habib has to go against this guy and this guy and this guy, but it ends up just being a case where they just pave over everything.
Yes.
It doesn't really matter. They're just going to lay the cement down and crush
You try
it
to
all.
run on him, he'll cut off the ring
Exactly.
and make it,
It just it just smothers everything in the end. And that's why, again, the better beef and Bivol fights are going to be so